Hello and welcome to my studio. In this video I'm going to show you how I made this picture. Glass and other highly reflective subjects such as ceramics or polished metal can be hard to capture without unwanted reflections and highlights. Some highlights are useful to convey shape, but others can be distracting. In this video I demonstrate one way to control highlights or almost eliminate them entirely, all in camera. And in this video I'm going to show you exactly how I did it. Okay, so this is what I've got set up so far. On the top of this table I've placed this piece of plywood and I've put this here because I'm going to use some background roll or seamless paper to form the background to the image. And you'll find it easy to do this if your table is about the same width or longer than the width of the paper. That way it stops it crinkling at the edges. So to support that I'm going to use this C-stand at the back here. So I'll just put the arm up and now I'll just pop this on the top of the arm, like so. And now I can roll out the amount of paper that I want. There we are. So I've rolled out the paper and I can now just place this on the table and just secure that with a couple of clips on the front here. There we are. So that's now all secured onto the table at the front here, and I've got a nice curve at the back. Now it's the curve at the back which will create the graduation behind the subject. So it's quite important to get that right. Okay, so now for the subject I've got my bottle, just place that on here, and of course the rose, which I'll just place on here, something like that. So that's it for the actual subject. So the next thing to do would be to set up a camera position. So I've got the tripod at the front here. This is probably a little low at the moment, so I'm just going to wind that up to an appropriate height. Probably about there should do. And this is where I'll place the camera. Now, I'm using a medium format camera which has an 80mm lens on the front of it at the moment. So that's roughly the same angle of view that you would get from a 50mm lens on a full frame format camera. And the camera is tethered into Capture One software, so it's easy to follow along and see the results as I get them. Okay, so I'll just pop that on the top of the tripod here. There we are. So with that, the next thing to do would just be to focus up the shot, so I can do that. So I'll just go for a rough focus, which I think should be about there somewhere. And with that, next thing to do, just turn the camera on. There we are, the camera's all on now, and the software has recognised the camera, and now I can show you all the settings that I have on the camera on the software here. So it's in full manual mode. I'm using a shutter speed of 125th of a second, which is the flash sync speed for that camera, ISO 100, and I've got an aperture set of f11. Now I'm using f11 on purpose because it will give me a reasonable depth of field. I want to make sure that I can keep the rose and the bottle in focus at the same time. So at this sort of distance that should work. Okay, so just with those settings and no flash set yet, what I'll do is just grab an image just to make sure I don't get any contamination from the house lights. And there we are. You can see clearly that there's nothing of the image here. There's a few highlights of the house lights in the top of the bottle here, but nothing too much to be worried about. Okay, so now I know for certain that any light which I add will be the only light which actually affects the subject. So to light this then, what I'm going to do is place a softbox at the back here. And the idea being that if I get it in more or less the right place, it should give me a graduation across the back here and backlight the bottle, which should show the colour which is in here. It's a slightly tinted blue colour, which I'm trying to bring out. So to do that, I'm going to use this flash head, which has a 1 foot by 4 foot softbox on the front of it. So I'm just going to place that at the back here. And I'm just going to put that up in the air to about there. That's it. Okay. So with that in something like position, what I'm going to do now is just grab an exposure. I'm just going to use TTL metering in the camera just to get me in the right ballpark. So I'll just grab an image and we'll see what we get. And there we are. In terms of a TTL exposure, that's not too bad at all. It probably needs to come up about half a stop. So what I might do is just increase the energy in that flash by half a stop. So to do that, I can just adjust the energy in the flash with the flash control, which on this camera is actually built in. So I'll take it out of TTL and just add half a stop to that flash. There we are. And with that, we'll just grab another image. Yes, that's a bit better. So this is what I had before, and this is what I've got now. So it's just brought the whole thing up ever so slightly. I can see that I've got the softbox just clipping the corner of the frame here, but I'm not too bothered about that, as I'm going to probably crop this down anyway. Okay. Now, I have some highlights on this bottle already. Just along the top of the bottle here, I've got some highlights which are emanating from the softbox at the back there. And I've done that on purpose to show the shape of this bottle. But what I actually want to do is also light this rose. You can see from the picture that it's all a bit dim at the front here. So to do that, I'm going to add another light, which is going to be around here somewhere. But that will also add some extra highlights to the bottle, which I probably don't want. I've got another studio head. I'm just going to place this about here somewhere, fairly close in, like that. And at an arbitrary energy level for this particular head, what I'm going to do is just grab an image and we'll see what we get. So there we are. We can see that this is possibly a little overlit as it is at the moment, but I've introduced this huge highlight along the bottle here together with some other highlights which aren't really helping the image any. So the first thing to do is to get the exposure right on the rose. So I think just looking at that, I probably need to take about 1.5 stops off the energy in this head. Yes, that seems to be a bit better. So this is what we had before, and this is what we've got now. So it's filling in this rose quite nicely. This is without it at all, and you can see all the highlights now disappeared in the bottle. And this is with that on, and it's filled in this, but it's given me all these highlights. So what I want to do is find a way that I can get rid of these highlights, leaving these ones where they are, without affecting the rest of the image. And a technique that you can use to do that is to use crossed polarizers. Now you may well be familiar with a polarizing filter that you can put on the front of your camera for taking pictures outside to darken the skies, etc. But there's another use that you can put to these as well. If you use it in conjunction with a polarizing filter, such as this, which can go onto the front of your light, you can actually control highlights quite effectively. If I just put this in front of that and rotate it, you may be able to see that as I rotate it, it gets darker. And that's because if the polarizers are crossed, it will actually eliminate that light completely. Now this only works for highlights and for virtual images. So if you have something which is diffuse, like a rose, it won't affect it at all. I'll put the filter on the camera and the light, and I'll show you what I mean. So I'll just screw that filter into the front of this lens. There we are. There we go. That filter is now on the front of this light. So to show you how this works, what I'm going to do is turn the modelling light on this flash head, like so. And I'm just going to start up live view. And here you can see this is the highlight. And obviously we've got some light going on the rose. But what I'm going to do now is rotate the filter on the front of the lens here. And as I do that, you'll be able to see the effect it has on the subject here. So here we go. I'll just rotate that slightly. And as I do that, you can see there is a point where that highlight disappears almost completely. And that is when the two polarizers are crossed. But as you can also see, it hasn't affected the illumination on the rose at all. Okay, so let's get rid of live view. And with those filters in place, but not changing the energy in either of these flashes, I'll just turn the modelling light out. I'll grab an image and we'll see what difference it makes to the overall exposure. And there we are. It's down by at least 1.5, maybe 2 stops. That's because the polarizing filters actually take quite a lot of energy out of the lights. So to compensate for that, what I'm going to do is add a couple of stops to the light at the back and a couple of stops to this one. Okay, so that's brought the exposure back, but the colour balance looks to have gone off slightly. Now that's down to the filter in front of the lens here. This is a linear polarizing filter, and that's quite important. That's possibly something I should have mentioned a little earlier. This will not work with a circular polarizing filter. So it needs to be a linear polarizer to make this work. The downside of those is that they do tend to introduce a bit of a color cast. So to get rid of that, what I'm going to do is just reset the white balance in the software here. Now I'm grabbing all these images in RAW, so this can always be done later, but it's nice just to do it at this stage so that you can see the effects live, as it were. There we are. So that's given me a neutral grey in the background there. So if I now just go back to the image that I captured without the polarizers in place, you can see the difference it makes. So this is without the polarizers, and this is with them. So it hasn't affected the rose at all, but it has affected everything else in the bottle. So you can see the effect that it's giving, which is quite powerful. So for capturing the image, that's it. What I'm going to do now is just go over into Photoshop and do the bare minimum of post-production. So here we are in Photoshop, and I've loaded up 2 of the images that I captured earlier. I have this one, which is without the use of the polarizers, and you can see I've got the highlights in the middle of the bottle here. And then I have this one, which is with the polarizers, and they've all disappeared quite nicely. If I go back to the previous one, you can see how the rose is lit, and incidentally you can also see that we're getting a bit of a sheen on these leaves from this light up here. But in this image, where I've used the polarizers, all these are now a much deeper colour, and that is because of the polarizer on the camera. But the use of the polarizer on the light has eliminated all of the highlights in the centre of the bottle, whilst not affecting the ones that I actually wanted, which is on the shoulders. So it does work rather well, I think. Okay, so there is very little to do to this. I'm just going to apply a crop. I'm using this for video, so I'm using a specific ratio of 16:9. And as you can see from that, that looks about right as it is. And there we have it. So I think this picture demonstrates quite well how you can use polarizers to eliminate unwanted highlights in shiny objects. The other thing to note about this image is that I've used a yellow rose on purpose, as it's a complementary colour to the blue in the glass. Okay, well, I hope you liked watching how I made that image, and if you like watching these sort of things, do click on the other images as they appear, and don't forget to subscribe. Oh, and hit the like button. Thank you very much for watching.